Hello everyone and welcome. It's Hugh here at Loxone again, and this is day number 3 of our webinar series for our foundation course on Loxone. So this is going to be 10 webinars in total, looking in depth at every little bit of Loxone to get from start to finish so that you all feel comfortable and confident in configuring a system. We've already had a brief overview of Loxone and who we are and what we do. Yesterday, we looked at Loxone config for the first time, and we had a quick overview of config, how it works, the different sections of it, and then connecting to a demo case. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen with you. And again, I've got a quick presentation to show you, and then we're going to get deeply involved in config and start adding things in and making things happen. So here is my screen here, and today's topic is going to be adding and replacing extensions, pairing tree and air devices. So this is going to be what we're looking at today. And through this topic, these are going to be our points for our agenda. We're going to just have a quick recap on connecting to our demo case. We are going to just have a quick recap on what we looked at yesterday. We're going to see how we can address a mini server. So that is give it an IP address so it can sit on the correct network. And then once we've done that, we're going to look at adding in extensions. So both searching and adding the extensions that our demo case physically has, as well as adding in extensions that we don't physically have present, because that's a beautiful thing with Loxone. We can add devices even when we don't have them physically there yet. We're then also going to look at adding in tree and air devices, so our own peripheral range, and then pairing in the peripherals that we have in our demo case. And so on that, let's start with talking about the extensions that we do have for Loxone. So we are very, very modular. Once you've got the mini server, which as we've discussed over the past 2 webinars, that is the brains of the system. You've got the mini server Gen 1, the mini server and the mini server Go, and all 3 of those you can connect extensions to. Extensions allow you to add extra features and expand your system. And we have a multitude of extensions available. So a few to just cover some of the ones you see on this page. You've got the extension, the aptly named extension. This gives you more inputs and more outputs. So more digital and analog inputs and more analog outputs. You've got the dimmer. So the dimmer extension gives you 4 channels of mains dimming. So 4 channels of 230 volt dimming. And again, you've got some more digital inputs on there. We've also got a relay extension. The relay extension gives you 14 16 amp rated relays. So if you need higher duty relays, the relay extension is you go to. And other than that, we've got tree and air for our own peripherals. We've got RS-232, RS-485 Modbus. We've got DMX, DALI, analog input, analog outputs. The list just goes on. And there you go. Again, you can see that is a quick snapshot of config and the available extensions that we do that you can add into config. So with extensions, what you have the ability to do is to do whatever you need to. Whatever you need to achieve, you can achieve with Loxone, and you just have to get the correct extensions. And we're modular in the sense that if, let's say, you completed a project and the customer said, oh, by the way, I've now built an extra room onto the back of my house. I'm going to put a projector in there and a projector screen. We've already got a cat cable going from that location back to the panel. Is there anything you can do with it? You can go, oh, projector has RS-232. Yeah, absolutely. I'll get an RS-232 extension from Loxone. Already got the cable there and we can control it. So that's the beauty of extensions, being able to add the ones you need when you need them. Now that we've looked at extensions and what the various ones we have are, let's move over to config. So let's just quickly recap on what we looked at yesterday in config. So I've already got config here with my project open. If I just close this project so that we're back at the front screen, so as soon as you open up config, this is the front screen with a list of all of the projects that you have on this machine. And so this is the one that I created yesterday, our foundation series. So I'm going to open this one up. And then quick recap, ribbon at the top shows you things that are relevant to the thing that you've selected at the moment. Parameters are extra little bits of detail on whatever you've selected. So you'll see parameters change for everything that you select in the config screen. The middle pane is your periphery list, so everything you've got available to configure with. And then the right-hand pane is where you actually do your configuration. And then a quick recap on what we have here on the screen. We have an input, so input 1 from our demo case into a function block, which is a switch. And then the output of the function block is the relay, the output on our demo case. So digital output 1, relay 1 on our demo case is on the output. And so what this piece of config means is that I can just tap input 1 and it will then latch output 1. And that's why function blocks are important, because they make clever things happen. And then just to recap again, if you click on testing at the top of config, we have an option called simulation. So even when you don't have a mini server, and even when you're not connected to a mini server, you can still simulate things happening. So you can see that I can press this input in simulation and it makes the output happen. So tap to go on and tap to go off. So there's our quick refresh of config. Now that we've looked at that, let's have a quick recap of connecting to our demo case. So at the top of config here, we have an icon that says connect. If I press the little drop down on that, I have a magnifying glass that says search. And when I select that, it looks across my network for every available mini server it can see. And you can see my one here, demo case. I can then select it and put in the username and password. Now I set my username as admin and my password as demo case. And then I press connect. And then what it does is it connects. This icon now says disconnect. And it tells me down here that I'm locally connected to demo case and that my program isn't identical. Don't quite know why it's not identical, so I'm just going to press save in, because what I can see on my screen is what I want to be in a demo case. And then if I quickly just switch my video around so that you can see my demo case instead. So here we have it over here, the demo case. If you get a demo case from us, then what actually happens by default is the demo case, there's actually a network cable here that goes underneath the box, and there's a Wi-Fi router in here. So when you get a demo case for us, you can just connect the Wi-Fi router that's in the box, and the SSID of the router is the serial number that you can see on this here. And then once you've connected, you could just do the search, connect to your demo case and get going. But if you want to do what I've done and have the demo case connected to your local network so that you can be on the internet at the same time, then as you'll see here, I've just got myself a network lead. I've plugged that into our router, and then I've readdressed the mini server. So I've made, let me go back a second. So I've plugged in here, so I've plugged into the demo case. The mini server by default does something called DHCP. And so actually what that means is it gets an address automatically from the network it's connected to. So if you do get a demo case and you want to connect it to your home network, all you have to do is plug it into your router at home, but just make sure that the demo case is turned off when you do that. And then once it's plugged into your router, turn the demo case on. And then this mini server will get an address automatically on your network. And then you can just connect to your normal Wi-Fi, do the search, and it should show up. However, for any of you that do have a little bit of networking knowledge and you want to address your mini server, so to give it an IP address on your network, what you do is you connect to it like I've done here. So I'm now connected. You then find the mini server in your periphery list. So here it is, select it. And then at the top here of the ribbon, you've got an option to configure mini server. And when you press that, it will allow you to set some extra details in your mini server. So you can set the mini server description. So that's when you do that search in this box here, what name comes up. So I'd want this to come up. Yeah, I'm going to rename this as Foundation Series. That's what we're doing. So that's what my mini server should be called. You can put in the mini server location and press determine automatically. And provided the mini server's on the network and has an internet connection, it will pull GPS data automatically. And then this is a really, really big point. Mini servers we're an Austrian firm, so the mini server comes from Austria. And so by default, its time zone is Europe/Vienna. Please change the time zone to be the time zone that you're in. Don't manually set the time, just change the time zone, and then the time will always be right, provided it's got an internet connection. Then on the next tab, you've got the networking options. So your mini server by default is on DHCP. If you want to, you can put in a static address like I have here. And you can also set your ports as well for things like remote access. And then under the external access tab, you can again set the remote access port, and you get to choose between using our own cloud DNS service or using something like Dyn DNS. And then you just press apply and send. The mini server then reboots, and you can see it's disconnected me because the mini server is taking those settings and is rebooting. And then after a few seconds, the mini server will start back up. So I can just see my LEDs on here. There we go, just starting back up now. And then when that's done, there it is. And look, now the name has changed to Foundation Series. So log back into it. And there we go. I'm connected again. Back to my little piece of config I have here. And then the final bit that I'm not sure I showed you yesterday. If I switch back to the demo case. There we go. So the config that I have on this page, input 1 into a switch block into output 1 means that I can toggle this switch here and output 1 comes on. The other bit is showing you the app or the web interface. So the web interface and the app, they follow the same layout. So it doesn't matter whether you're on a tablet, a phone, or on a web browser. When you're connected to your mini server, you can go to testing up here, and then you can click web interface here. And what that will do is that will open up your default browser with the web interface. And it, as you can see, will connect on the IP address your mini server's on. You can then log into here. And when you're logged in, I should be able to find, so you see rooms. I've currently got a room called not assigned, and in there is a switch. And if I press the switch in the app, the output goes on the demo case. So we already have a working interface. This bit here that you can see called switch is the function block. So that's really important to know. It's the function blocks which are displayed on the app, not inputs, not outputs, function blocks. And the way that we can tell whether they're displayed or not is when you click onto the function block and you go over to the parameters, there is a parameter here called use. If it's ticked, it shows in the app. If it's unticked, it doesn't show in the app. And then at the moment, in my app, my switch is called switch and it's in a room of not assigned and it's a category of controls. I don't like that. I want it to be in the living room. I want it to be for lighting. And I probably want to call it lighting as well. And again, all of those are done over on the parameters here. So if I want that switch to be called lighting instead, I change its name. If I want it to appear in a category of lighting rather than a category of controls, that's done here. And if I want it to appear in the room living room instead of not assigned, that's done here. So now if I save this in, it'll be called lighting in the app, it'll be in the category of lighting, and it'll be in the room of living room. So if I save that in to show you, you can see there on the web interface that it's telling me the mini server is rebooting. When it is rebooted, if I now go to rooms, look at that, living room. Click in the living room, look at that, category of lighting, and my switch is now called lighting. If I press it, there's my output on, and then I could press the toggle switch up here, and it turns it back off again. And you'll also see that anything I do physically also follows through to the app as well. So you can see me physically toggling that switch is changing its status in the app. So full two-way communications. Brilliant. So now that we've just had that quick recap on yesterday, let's start looking at what we have today. So let's start looking at adding extensions and replacing extensions. So what we have in our demo case, as well as the mini server, we have a tree extension and we have an airbase extension. And what you'll see at the moment is both of these are flashing orange. My mini server is flashing green, which means healthy. Both of these are flashing orange. Orange means that they're healthy, but they aren't connected to a mini server yet. If they're flashing red, it means there's a problem. If they're flashing green, it means that they're healthy and connected to the mini server. So we need to get both of these onto the mini server. Now we have two ways of doing this, and let me show you both ways. The first way is I could select my mini server here in my config, and then the top ribbon changes. And up here, I actually have the option to add an extension. And so I could manually add myself one of these extensions. So I could manually add myself a tree extension. And you'll see it then adds it to the periphery list for me, but at the moment it's grayed out. Grayed out means that it's in config, but it doesn't physically exist yet. And so what I could then do is I could click back on the mini server, and provided I'm connected to the mini server, I then get this little magnifying glass here that says extension search. So I could press extension search, and then it will show all of the extensions that it can see connected to the mini server with their serial number. So I could select this tree extension here, and I've got two options. I can either add it as a new extension, or I could replace an extension that's in my config file. So because I've already pre-added the tree extension into my config file, I don't want to add this as a new one because then I'd end up with two of them. So instead what I want to do is I want to choose replace, and I want to replace it with the one that's in my panel. The airbase extension, by comparison, I haven't pre-added into my config file. So you'll see I have no option to replace. So what I want to do with this one is just press plus here to add it. And there we go. As you see, they're now both in there, and they're now both filled out solid, and in the parameters of each, there is a serial number assigned. So what will happen now when I press save in mini server, if you just then cast your eyes back over to my webcam, when the mini server reboots, look at that, they're both now flashing green. So they're now flashing green because they're connected to this mini server. The next really, really cool thing that config does, you'll see that they now both have a green circle on them to tell me that they're working and they're connected. If I now select one of them in config while I'm connected to the mini server, so if I select my tree extension, look at that. It physically flashes rapidly red-green. So it's identifying itself to me that that is the extension that I've selected. So if I did have a panel with, say, 5 or 6 tree extensions because it was a massive project, and I was looking at this list and I went, I don't know which one's which, I could select it and it would physically identify itself to me. The next really cool thing with extensions is when you're on the parameters of all of your extensions, you'll see that there is an option for row in cabinet and position in cabinet. So if I just select off the tree extension, do you see at the moment that they're all flashing green, but all of the green flashes is out of order? Now, wouldn't it be great if I could make this run in sequence like Knight Rider? And I can. So I can say that my mini server on the parameters is row 1, position 1, which it is. Then my tree extension would be row 1, position 2. And my airbase extension would be row 1, position 3. Then, once all those positions are correct and we're saved in, there we go. We can already see it synchronized up. So now they are all flashing in sequence. How cool is that? So you can get your entire panel to flash in sequence, even on different DIN rails. It's just me being a little bit nerdy and something I really, really like. And so that's extensions. So as the two ways of us putting extensions on. If we've got them physically connected, we can do an extension search and just add or replace them. Or if we don't have them yet, or we're building this config file off-site, we can manually add extensions and then we can just replace them in later. So if I just whacked in another relay extension as an example, I already have all of the available relays on that relay extension ready to start configuring with. And then I can just as simply select that relay extension and press delete to get rid of it. Wonderful. If I just put the webcam back on me. So that would be the first part of today's webinar, looking at adding and replacing extensions. So now that we have our two extensions that we're going to be using added, let's start looking at adding peripherals. Because everything else that's in my demo case, the touch, the motion sensor, the RGBW dimmer, they are tree peripherals. So the next thing is, how can we add tree and air peripherals? And the answer is pretty much exactly the same as we add extensions. So what we do is we highlight either the tree or the air extension in the config file, and then the top ribbon again changes. And again, you've got two options. You can either manually add a tree or an air device. So you can see while I've got the tree extension selected, I can manually add all of my tree devices. If it's the air-based extension, I can manually add all of the air devices. And so again, what you can do is you can completely create your config file off-site, have everything configured up, and then you just have to go to site, search for all of them, and then replace the devices you've really added. So what I'm going to do is, on the tree extension, I'm going to manually add one tree device. So one of the tree devices that I have in my demo case, I'm going to manually add, and that is going to be the motion sensor. So I'm going to go motion sensor tree, and then when I click add, it will ask me where it goes. So I need to put an installation place and a room. So a motion sensor goes on the ceiling, so that's going to be its installation place, and its room is going to be living room. And then I'm going to press apply. And just like an extension, it's grayed out at the moment because I haven't physically paired it. And so next, let's show pairing tree and air devices. So webcam back to the demo case. So back on the demo case. And just like extensions, we need to search for devices. So what I'm going to do is highlight the tree extension. And instead of clicking add tree device for everything else, I'm going to instead click here, tree device search. And so when I press tree device search, it will then search out everything it can see connected to my tree extension. So you can see my tree extension is flashing, and then on my config file, everything on this left-hand side is devices it can find, and everything on the right-hand side is devices that I've already got in config that I compare these devices to. And then again, identification. So just like the extensions, tree and air devices will do something to identify themselves to you. So as I wave my hand over the motion sensor, you would have seen that it flashes yellow on the left-hand side and the identification count goes up. So that is telling me that that is that motion detector that is going off. And also when I select it in the tree device search, again, look, it flashes to show me that that's the one I've selected. So if I had 40 odd motion sensors on a project, I don't have to write down the serial numbers on a piece of paper and where I put them, and then for somebody to put them in the wrong place and me to get it all wrong. I can just do a tree device search, highlight them in the left-hand side, and then they will physically identify themselves to me. So motion sensors will flash red, green really rapidly. RGBW dimmers will flash the output that's connected to them. So the LED strip is connected to this RGBW dimmer. So as well as the RGBW dimmer itself flashing red, green, it's also flashing what's connected to it. And switches, you can just about hear that, will click at you. So really, really easy ways of identification. I can also press this switch and you'll see again, it flashes yellow in my config file and it tells me the number of times that I've pressed it. And so to replace a tree or air device that you've already manually added into my config, so I manually added this motion sensor and I want to replace it with this one here. So all I do is select the motion sensor that I want to replace it with, select the one that I want to be replaced, and then I press the right arrow. And there we go. That's now replaced that motion sensor that I put in the ceiling in the living room with the one from my demo case. And as you can see, it's disappeared from the left-hand side now. For devices that I haven't already added, that I just want to add fresh, I select it on the left-hand side. And then at this top option here, where I've got new device, I then select the drop down for the room it's going in, so living room, and the installation place. So installation place for my RGBW in the living room, let's say it is behind the TV. Press enter, so the installation place gets saved, and then I press the right arrow. And there we go. That's now my RGBW dimmer added in the living room, behind the TV. And then finally, touch tree switch, room, living room, installation place, it's probably by the door. And then right arrow, and it is added in. Rooms and installation places are critically important. Please don't leave room as not assigned and installation places as blank. Not only are they your reminder in your config file of where you've put things, but also they do come into play with certain parts of configuration. So those are 3 tree devices I have in my demo case now added. Motion sensor, touch switch, RGBW dimmer. This door contact is neither air nor tree. This one here is actually a digital input wired into digital input A to the mini server itself. So now those 3 are added. I'm going to press the red cross there, and then I'm going to save in mini server. And then watch what happens now. This motion sensor will flash 2 or 3 times green to tell me it's been paired in, and then it stops flashing. So stops flashing means that it is part of my config file and it is now connected to config. You'll see my RGBW dimmer is also flashing green. So job done, they're now paired in. My RGBW dimmer, because it would be in the same panel as my extensions, I have the ability on that as well to set an installation place, row and position. So this would be position 4. And so then I can make that part of the lovely blinky sequence of lights on my demo case. And then when that's saved in, just give it a second to sync, and there you go, lovely sequence of blinky lights. Don't you just love the little things like that? And then for air devices, these would be exactly the same. I can manually add them from the list here once I've got the airbase selected, or I can do an air device search. I don't have any air devices currently in pairing mode, but if you do have a new air device, then as soon as you put the battery into it, it will put itself into pairing mode for a period of 10 minutes. If it goes out of pairing mode because you haven't paired it within that time, just take the battery out, put the battery back in, and you can also put a device back into pairing mode manually. There's usually a learn button on them, and you just hold that down for a few seconds, and then they go into pair mode. And again, the devices will show you that they're in pairing mode some way. Most air devices have a little LED on them that will flash red, green, amber in sequence when they're in pair mode. And so that is devices learned in. So I now have my mini server. And if I select that, it flashes red and amber really quickly there. And I've got my tree, again, flashes rapidly. My air flashes rapidly. And I've also got my tree devices learnt in as well. So if I selected my motion sensor in the list, flashes rapidly. Select my dimmer, flashes, select my switch, clicks. So even once they're saved in, you can still select them in the periphery list. They identify themselves to you. And then the final thing to show you for this webinar is what we get under each of these peripherals that we have now paired in. So if I expand the motion sensor as an example, you'll see that the one motion sensor actually has 2 available inputs to it. That's because our motion sensor is both a motion and a brightness sensor. So you couldn't have it as one single input. The reason being is that motion is digital. Motion is either there or it is not there, whereas brightness is analog. So it's a value. It is either 100 lux, 200 lux, 30 lux. It's not bright or not bright. And so on each of these, you can expand it and see the available inputs or outputs on those peripherals. So we can see on our motion sensor, we've got brightness and motion available. If I wanted to use them, I would drag them out onto the page. And just like I've done with this input, I would click and drag to draw a line where I wanted it to go. So I could drag out the brightness and the motion. Under the RGBW dimmer, I could drag out the output there, and you'll see the difference here. The RGBW dimmer, when you drag it out, is an output. That's because it's something that Loxone is affecting, not something that has an effect on Loxone. So a motion sensor, these two are inputs. An RGBW dimmer, this is an output. And then under the touch tree, you will see that there are 3 inputs available: temperature, humidity, and T5. So the touch and the touch pure has a T5, which is the 5 touch inputs on it. And it's also got a built-in temperature and humidity sensor. So if I wanted to use the temperature somewhere, I could drag that out. If I wanted to use the humidity, I could drag that out. And then T5 is a single input for all of the 5 touch points. And we'll come on to why on our next available webinar. As to just kind of put it quickly, on certain function blocks, we know what a touch switch should do for them. And so we only need a single input in those function blocks, and it works out which part of the switch to use. If you did want to manually define parts of the switch, you can do this as well. So if I just take all of those off the page for now, because I don't need them, and I select my touch tree in the periphery list, on the parameters of it, you have the options to show buttons 1 through to 5. So if I wanted to, I could tick each of these, and you'll see it adds an additional input for me for each of the 5 touch points on the touch switch. And the way that the touch switch is numbered is it's left to right. So top left is 1, top right is 2, middle is 3, bottom left is 4, bottom right is 5. So if I wanted to make the center of this touch switch do the same as input 1 here, I would click on I3 to input 3 under the touch tree, drag it, and then I would click and drag a line from I3 into the trigger there, save that in, and now I've essentially just created a piece of config that would be very, very similar to two-way switching. So when that's saved in, if I press this switch here, so input 1, turns the light on, and if I press here, turns it off. Press there, on, press there, off. So I've now got essentially two-way switching for an output with Loxone. And I think that about covers us for today. So from Monday, the webinars, we will be getting into the nitty-gritty of kind of our standardized function blocks. So function blocks that combine things like touch switches, motion sensors, and lighting outputs, and provide a lot of very clever logic to make decisions based on which ones go off. But I would encourage you all, please, over the weekend to pick up config, to have yourself your config file and start playing around with things. Start adding things in. Start seeing if you can make motion sensors turn this output on. Really, really encourage that for you. On this touch tree, I'm going to untick all of the buttons that aren't button 3, because that's the only one I need to use. I'm then also just going to quickly flick back to the slideshow here, just to cover off the last couple of slides I've got. So we got up to there and all of the available extensions we have. So just to highlight what we've just covered, extensions, as well as tree and air peripherals, you can add without any physical hardware. So you can pre-add all of the extensions and the peripherals you want to use in this system, drag them all out onto your pages, connect them all to function blocks, save in, not save in if you don't have a mini server, or save in if you do have a mini server, and you can simulate if you don't have a mini server, and if you do have a mini server, you can actually already have a working app even without physical hardware available. When you're pairing in physical hardware, whether it be extensions, tree devices, or air devices, they will identify themselves to you in some way. So you don't have to write all of the serial numbers before you get started. A mini server can have 30 extensions, so 30 extensions per mini server. A tree extension has 2 branches, a left branch and a right branch, and on each branch you can connect up to 50 tree devices. And then an air-based extension can have 128 air devices paired to it. And yes, you can have more than 1 tree and air extension per mini server. They're just extensions. If you wanted, you could have 30 tree extensions on 1 mini server. And I think that about covers it for today. Again, just a reiteration, we have very, very powerful software. Please put config on your laptop if you haven't already done it. Please create yourself a project. Please start playing around. Please start having some fun with this. And if you would like a demo case to work on, like I've been working on here, that is the person you want to contact. Please get in touch with Megan and she can sort you out with one. Other than that, if I put the camera back on me, thank you all very much for joining. It has been an absolute pleasure. I hope you're enjoying this sequence. As I said, from our next webinar, we will start looking at specific topics and then the function blocks to solve them. So we will be looking in depth at lighting, at heating, at shading, and all the various things we can do within Loxone. Hope to see you again next time. Thank you very much, guys, and goodbye for today.